do it. So let me just introduce myself. I'm Hugh Shanahan. I'll be doing the first presentation part, but much of this session is really about getting your opinions on things. So this is not a session where we just tell you stuff all the time. Okay, this is yeah. I'm afraid you're going to be working basically. So if switch over. By the way, can I also ask? Can everybody hear me? That's sorry, a basic question. Okay, good. Should I go off or vanish or whatever? Then please just shout. So first of all, what I'm going to do is share my screen. By the way, could somebody just also put into the chat the links to the presentation and the shared docs just to let people. Brilliant, thank you. Venkat, is that the shared document?
Yeah.
Oh, great. Okay, fine. Yeah, and if people want to have the presentation as well, we'll put that in there because there's some nice links to things that you can look at there as well. All right. So let me share my desktop. All right. Okay, so just to be sure, to make sure you haven't walked into the wrong session, this is the interest group for the CODATA RDA Schools of Research Data Science. So if you've managed to end up in the wrong room, don't worry, now's your time to slip away. Just to note, also, actually, so that's the subtitle for this is How to Achieve Financial Sustainability and Get More People Involved in Training Sessions. So what this session is about is getting your advice and your opinion on those particular topics. As you said, I'm Hugh Shanahan, but here are also all the other co-chairs involved in who are part of the schools, and most of them are here today to field your questions. One more thing to note is that here's the link to our webpage. Here's our Twitter handle, and here's our generic email if you have any particular questions. At this point, I'm going to hand over to Venkat, who will just give us, who knows a lot more about Juno than me, so that just to explain how things work.
I'm not sure about that much more, but let me see. So I hope everyone in the room is relatively familiar with the interface, but I'll just quickly take you through it again. For everyone in the room, you've got a tiled view of the different people that have turned their cameras on. You can maximize any given tile with the expand icon in the bottom right-hand corner of that tile. So one of the tiles I can see is Hugh's presentation. So if you want to maximize that, you can do so by clicking on the expand icon. In the bottom left-hand portion of your screen, you'll have 5 icons to basically turn on your video, your audio, screen share, select which source for your microphone, and also the exit button, which please don't touch. And you have some emojis, sorry, in the bottom right-hand portion. So please do use that for showing what you're feeling. And in the right-hand side, you have the chat window. If you want to ask any questions, please use the Q&A tab in there, and we'll try and go through any questions that are asked. You should be able to upvote any questions that have been asked by someone else. If you particularly like them, please use that function. This is a breakout, not a plenary session, so we do encourage people to turn on their cameras and their audio and, just show yourselves and, let's interact. But yeah, I think that's all for now. But if you have any technical issues with audio, one of the things that we found is please try refreshing your session. That seems to help a lot of times, but do let us know if that doesn't help, okay? Thank you. Back to you.
Okay, thanks very much, Venkat. Yeah, that was actually way more authoritative than what I could do. I think this session is also being recorded, just as a note. And yeah, this is a breakout. This is a breakout session. So and I think we're a relatively small number of. We're an intimate grouping. So please feel free to raise questions and so on. What I'm going to do now is just kind of go through the running order for today's meeting. So first of all, what I'm going to do is do the kind of standard PowerPoint thing of give you an introduction, try and give you an introduction to the schools. Over the last 18 months, well, surprise, surprise, there's been quite a lot of change, and we've had to make adaptations to actually definitely the most wide-ranging changes in the light of the pandemic. So for those of you who know nothing about the schools, hopefully this will be interesting for you. But also for those of you who are kind of have heard of the schools and come to these meetings, the latter half of that introduction should be of interest in terms of all the kind of activities that's going on and how we've adapted to the pandemic. After that, then we will have these breakout sessions. So we'll make use of probably 2 of the breakout rooms. I think we'll just see how many people we have, just see if we need to do that. And there we'll be talking about sustainability and instructor training, and I'll get to that. And we sort of expecting you to spend about 40 minutes discussing, in parallel, discussing those topics. And then what we'll do is the last part of the session, the last 40 minutes, is where we try and share what we've discussed and so on in the breakout sessions. So in that respect, so for those breakout sessions, we need somebody who's willing to report back and say this is what we found, so that basically the other half of the group can find out about what's going on, and we'll basically spend 20 minutes on both of those topics. Just have a light touch request for if people want how to get involved and so on. Okay, so now let me spend a bit of time just talking about the schools and so on. Hopefully this won't overwhelm people with detail here. So let me first of all talk about the overall goal of the interest group and this initiative. It's about creating communities of researchers that have the foundational data science skills to enable efficient and effective research for the 21st century. Okay, so that's our sort of overall, that's the overall goal that we have here. If you go and look at our webpage, there's a whole series of kind of other goals that are going on there, but this sort of summarizes where we're at. And there's a few things that sort of, if we were doing sort of scanning and doing a kind of a keyword analysis, the things that probably I, get a marker pen and highlight is the word communities. Just go to laser pointer here. Is that word communities and data science skills? Those are the things that we're trying to build on here. So the consequences of that goal is, in some respect, twofold, which is we're about providing training, but we're also about building communities. So what we have done since 2016 is our kind of flagship is running intensive 2-week physical schools, which are about creating a bonding experience for all of the people who are involved in that. In that, at least initial way that we've run things, the idea is to deliver a very broad but kind of shallow curriculum. So in other words, we're covering many topics, but we're doing that on a basically spending like about a half a day to maybe up to a day and a half discussing that, just to give people an idea of what's going on. And that covers fairly technical skills such as data science skills, but also discussing responsible research practices as well. So it's to stress the schools are very different from the kind of boot camp experience that you might, or data science boot camp that you see. In other words, days 1 to 3 we immerse you or days 1 to 5 we immerse you in Python. Days 6 to 7 we immerse you in machine learning techniques and so on. We cover those things, but we also cover broader, much more than the kind of purely technical stuff. We've scaled up increasingly the activities. We encourage alumni to stay in touch, collaborate, and teach what they've learned. Again, one of the things that we're really notice is that model where a research project sets up a series of workshops or something like that, or there's a school or something like that, and people are sort of parachuted in, they do the experience, and it's all great and so on, and then researchers go back to their own institution, and then in some respects they kind of hit sand because suddenly they're surrounded by people who don't know any of the stuff that they've learned, and it's kind of hard for them to make progress, particularly if they're fairly junior. The idea here is that we encourage people to stay in touch, that we organize further events where they can talk to each other, and more particularly that they have that confidence to reach out to, they're having some problem in running an R script, and that they reach out to their colleagues who might live in the next city or something like this and say, hey, how do I do that thing again with arrays? Like, oh yeah, that's how you do it. Oh yeah, exactly. And then people continue, and people do that. They learn from each other. We've seen numerous examples of people collaborating on research, and that ultimately we want them also to go on and keep teaching what they're doing. Our focus is very much on early career researchers. And furthermore, although we have run instances in high income countries, the demand is greatest here for low and middle income countries. That's really what our kind of focus is here. Very briefly, I just want to outline what's covered in that curriculum in the school. So just to note, kind of right in the middle of this is sessions on open and responsible research, which really sort of feeds into all these other sections here. In particular, what we do is that this is discussing open science, open research, getting people to talk about that and think about what's the consequences for them. And in some respect to say to people, well, you don't have to eat the whole meal. You can just just pick one thing from this and do that. And if you do that, that's a success. There's a strong ethical component in what we're doing there. And that actually feeds into all of these other different things that we teach, because what we do is we ask people to think about some ethical aspect of each one of these different topics. So that gets people thinking about this. Now, what we're also doing is, as I said, we're covering sort of quite the technical issues. So software carpentry, where we introduce things like the command line and Git and a particular language, usually R, but increasingly Python. We have a course on visualizing data. We have a course at the end on computational infrastructures, which is talking about sort of clouds and grids and so on. And we'll also cover, spend some time on machine learning topics. But we'll also cover topics such as research data, which is, obviously part of the reason, which was something that we kind of picked up from the RDA, and it's something that most ECRs really know nothing about. They come for the software carpentry and the machine learning, but they stay for the RDM. We also cover things like author carpentry, which is thinking about authorship in the 21st century. And more recently, we've introduced a module on information security, basically to say to people, being open doesn't mean life is a Wild West. You can actually lock things down. So we've been up and running since August 2016. We've run 11 physical schools, and we've taught about 450 students. And we do that from multiple disciplines. All our schools, we will welcome people from every discipline that's there, as long as they're doing something with data. And we've done that in 5 different continents. That's just doing some back of the envelope calculations. That's equivalent to about $425,000 worth of teaching. That's working with a UK fee structure. If we were looking at a university on the continent of Europe, that would be less. If it were the US, it would be more. And all of this is based on a volunteer network. There is Rob Quick and his team at Indiana University set up a really nice interactive map, which gives you an idea of all the different events that we've run so far. All right. Now, there's a few, Beijing and Manchester. Beijing was a CODATA only event. Manchester was something that we've done for data stewards and so on. But this kind of gives you an idea of the spread. If you go to the presentation, click on this map, it will take you to the full application. So it can give you a breakdown of who's been attending and what sort of disciplines they work in. It's a really nice, it's really lovely to play around with that tool, and I do recommend that you do so. In terms of sort of other outputs, the curriculum is an official output of the RDA. We were a case study for an OECD report on digital skills. We are working in partnership with Fairs Fair, and Fairs Fair have been incredibly supportive of what we're doing, and in particular, we are running data steward instructor training there. We're very proud of the fact that we've built up the alumni that are involved, and out of the 8 co-chairs that we have, 4 of our alumni are now co-chairs. Physical schools trundling along, I think we got to 2020 and the number of schools was expanding from 1 to 2 to 3 a year and so on. It just seemed to be growing and growing, and then everything kind of went, oh, hang on, we have to reconfigure in the light of the pandemic. And in particular, I think one of the things that we have to look at in terms of the reality that if we're looking at, this is something that we need to change to for a few more years at the very least, because low and middle income countries, vaccinations there's going to be a slower rollout there. So this is not something that we can just say, oh yeah, we're getting to the end of it. All right. So in that first year, last year, we had to do quite a bit of reconfiguring. So the first thing that we did was we ran another event for our alumni, which was run virtually, and that we turned that into a Train the Trainer event. So in other words, going through all of those topics and introducing people to different aspects of this, saying, okay, how would you teach this, and what are the lessons that are learned there? And that was something that was sort of a good thing for us to get our heads around and say, okay, how do we do things in a virtual case? And that was hosted by the ICTP, which is the institution that's been our main partner in terms of hosting schools. We kickstarted a series of regular webinars for our alumni. So again, to make them feel, again, sort of build on what's been learned and so on. So for example, Raphael Kobe did a really interesting one on text mining and so on. And this is something which is very much headed up by Louise Bezuidenhout. We also in partnership with Fairs Fair, sort of continue to run the Data Steward instructor training. And so far, we've done this in Manchester and San Jose. Again, these are virtual events. We're in the process. So next month, we will run more of those, which we'll talk about in the next slide. So if 2020 was in some respect a period where we were kind of figuring out what was going on, this year is where we've said, right, okay, we've got this virtual thing. We understand what's going on here. So the first virtual version of our 2-week school is going to run, and that'll be hosted by the University of Pretoria, and that'll run from May until July. Now, that's not all the teaching all the time. What that is so it's the 2 weeks of material, but it's more spread out. So what we're doing is we give the students pre-prepared video material to go through, and then there is an hour or two every week, a few hours every week over that period where we provide some additional training where people can ask questions and so on. All right. So this is really, really exciting to see this rolling out. We will have another one of these, if the first virtual school is very much oriented towards a Southern African audience, this virtual school, which is going to be hosted by the ICTP, who are based in Trieste, and with support from Fairs Fair, that'll be more sort of global, looking for a global audience. Fingers crossed, we've likely penciled in a third possible virtual school to be hosted in Brazil in Q4. All right. Bianca Peterson has been hard at work on setting up on top of the virtual school, also in terms of looking at an instructor training event as well. And as we noted, we continue with Data Steward instructor training. Next month, we'll be running one in Botswana. In June, we'll be organizing an event. We're running an event in Belgium for the Flanders Open Science Board. And we have other events planned for Ireland and other locations in Europe for this year. Okay, so that's a kind of a review of what's been happening within the schools and what we've been doing, what we're planning to do for this year. At this point, what I'd like to do is that we can move to the breakout sessions. Now, by the way, if has anybody at this point, maybe should just stop and ask, does anybody have any questions?
Yeah, here. I was just going to jump in that there is one question in the Q&A, which I thought you might want to address. I gave an answer with lots of typos, actually, but there is Marie-Claude asking about language, basically, and has this been taken into consideration when we've been doing instances of the school? I replied partly that we have done some in Spanish, but I think you can probably say more too.
Yeah, I think this is Mary. Thanks. That's a really, really good question. So in terms of the kind of the history of doing this, it's like, yes, we do this. It's translations are harder to get implemented than we thought. So about 2 years ago, I can't remember when, there was an effort to try and get a sort of a community-based Spanish translation done. That was when we realized, oh yeah, this is quite tricky to get implemented. For the Data Steward instructor training events, we have made a proposal to Fairs Fair to get those materials translated into a number of different languages, Spanish and Portuguese, I think. And we're just kind of waiting. On whether we get the green light on that. So that's where we are at the present moment. I think with the video materials that we are creating at the present moment, that will be possibly even tougher to get translated unless we do things that like machine level translation or something like that. My own opinion is that what we need to get that done is to get sufficient funding to actually go and then hand that over to a company to say, just get that done. And it's a matter of doing that. Now, if there is a grounds, as I said, we had one goal, which was sort of a community-based effort. If there was a groundswell to have another go at that, I think we'd be very interested to hear that. But I guess we're sort of right now, our priority is figuring out how well the virtual sessions are working at the present moment. Marcy, I'd like to get your opinion on this as well. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Thank you. No, I agree with you that professional help will be useful in this case, and for that, we need a bit of money. There's Luis is mentioning on the Q&A that there's an initiative from alumni, the alumni group. They have a list of a vocabulary list of key terms used in the school.
Yes.
And this is actually one really nice project that is volunteer lead, and that will allow us to do a small translation of everything that we need for the schools. It might seem small, but when it comes to having a community-based translation, I think it's valuable to have a first experience with a list of keywords. About the Spanish and French translation, we've had offers of this, like a Canadian organization offered us to translate to French, but Costa Rican organization offered us to translate it to Spanish. But in both cases, we need more financial content to finish those translations.
Yeah.
We have another question here, basically asking, are the students that come out of the schools, do they get a certificate? Is it internationally recognized, what we do?
So if I'll jump in there. So yes, students are given certificates. These are certificates of attendance that are handed out by the institution that hosts these events. As the organizers ourselves, the group doesn't hand out certificates. Nor have we at the present moment, looked to try and, for example, convert this, say, oh, okay, is there an ETCS type statement or something like crediting from that respect? Although that's something that we could think about. The other thing that we can also say, and I think it's something that we need to kind of jump up and down and shout from the rooftops, is to say, yeah, the curriculum is recognized as an official output of the RDA. So, that's actually quite an important statement to say that there are at least nominally 11,000 data professionals are saying, yes, these are the right things that should be thought at the present moment. Yeah, if I can circle back to the point made about vocabulary, that's a really, really important development, which is again something which is a really good example of something that's very much being led by our alumni. And I haven't put that in there, but we have on one of our newsletters we have a blog on that, which is well worth reading.
I was going to ask a different question. Are you finished there?
Yeah. Well,
okay.
If
Sorry.
If everybody else is happy, that if anybody else wants to jump in, yeah.
Mika, she asks about the difference between a data scientist and a data steward. Do you want to elaborate on that? The target people that we're training here. So you made a distinction between data stewards and data scientists.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Venkat, feel free to jump in on this if we get something wrong. So the school that we run is for early career researchers, and what we would call that is we use that term research data science, which is just this set of skills that researchers need, and that combines sort of explicit data science things, such as getting your way around the command line, using machine learning, using Git, all those sorts of things, and also covering things like research data management, open and responsible research, and so on. So that's quite a broad set of skills that we think are good for researchers. So it's not particularly those sets of skills that are useful for researchers. Now, for example, the RDM, part of that is there's a day and a half typically of teaching in that. So it's not as much of a deep dive as the data steward training, all right, which does much more of a deep dive into that topic. The other thing also to note is that after the data steward training has been getting a lot of sort of updates, so we've turned that now into data steward instructor training. So in other words, what that is very much about is for people who are employed professionally as data stewards, and typically they're ones which are really new in their role, and saying, okay, well, actually, a lot of what your job is about is actually training up other people. So you'll be, in your institution, you'll be training up researchers on how to write DMPs. You'll be thinking about putting together policies and so on. So it's part of that, of those events are now about discussing a little bit of pedagogy and saying to people, well, how would you design your course if you're going to teach? Okay, how do you do DMPs? What are the things that you should be thinking about? And oh yeah, here are some materials that you can make use of as well in terms of that. Venkat, please.
It looks like, well, no, Mike, I invite you to actually turn your video on and your audio and speak, because I can see that you put an answer there as well, but please share with us.
Yeah, thank you. So I was asking this because I really like the schools. So anything you do for whatever audience is just fantastic, and particularly because it's also outside the standard European context. So that is just great. I was just looking for, as many of you know, we have in the Netherlands an elaborate report on professionalizing data stewardship, and within that context, we had the discussion again. Well, we need to formalize those jobs. So we are talking about formalizing a data steward job. That's an obvious choice. But within that context, there was the question: do we need data scientists as well? And are data scientists, is that also a support? Well, don't take it too low, because support it's quite high. Well, high expectations of that type of support you ask from either a data steward or a data scientist, but would a data scientist be more like a researcher role, or could that also be a research support role, helping researchers? And then there was the additional question: what about the research software engineer? So it is becoming quite complicated, and at least in the Netherlands, we are sure that we need a data steward job profile, a formal data steward job profile. And then we said, well, don't do that for the data scientist, because that's probably more the researcher role. And from that perspective, I was asking you whether the data stewards, is that indeed a different branch? So could we have data steward training and data steward, well, no, data steward trainers and data steward trainees? And do we also have data scientist trainers and trainees? But I'm getting the picture now. So you have trainers, whatever you name them, and you have trainees. And the trainees, I think, are the main audience. You want to have as many researchers skilled with data scientists, data steward type of things that they do within their research. So you want to kind of make sure that they do the job up to a certain level themselves.
Yeah.
And the data stewards are those trainers that help them.
Unfortunately, Bianca seems to be having audio-visual problems, which she would have been able to talk about the pedagogy aspect, I think, a lot more. But yeah, that really needs to be more of an integral part of the data stewardship strand of teaching. Teaching others to how to teach the materials, because that's not really built into the main strand of the schools, which are mainly aimed at just the data scientists, as you put it. So yes, there is that distinction. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Okay. Yeah, and Mikey, I'm happy to talk further about this kind of, offline or whatever, because it is certainly a fair point that there are all these different kind of emerging roles, and that there's a need to provide training. I think we're kind of like, can't do everything, and we're trying to pick what's prioritized. But I'd be really happy to talk further about this. I'm aware that. Yes.
I was just going to suggest we have just one more question. I can only see one more question, and then we do the breakout rooms.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay, definitely the last question. Are all students funded by CODATA RDA, or do some students self-fund?
It's very much a mixed economy, and it depends on. So in the physical schools, it very strongly depended on where we hosted things. For example, within the events that we run at ICTP Trieste, the ICTP have a strong record in terms of, part of their mission statement is providing training to researchers from low and middle income countries. So they provide support for, it's kind of a range of different types of support. For the South African schools, there's more policy of saying there are registration fees that are there that are in place, and then it's more discussing on a kind of and then allocating a certain amount of support for them. Part of this is, thank you for asking that question, because it really kind of leads into at least one of the breakout sessions that we're talking about in terms of thinking about our own sustainability at the present moment. So does anybody else want to jump in on that? Okay, I'm getting silence. So sorry, I'm just staring at it. I'm just staring at my presentation here, so I don't see anybody else. I don't see movements, whatever. But
I think you're right. We can take this into the breakout rooms, can't we?
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, so if it's all right, so as you said, we have 2 breakout sessions. By the way, I don't even know how many people do we have in on the call at the present moment.
Yeah, that's kind of difficult to be absolutely certain about. I think there might be about 30 or 40.
Okay, great. So
guys, I went outside the room, and then I rejoined, and then I saw the number of participants. Then it was around 20. Okay, 25, I think.
Great. Okay. So that's good. So what we'll do is we'll make use of 2 of the breakout rooms that are here. So, and basically for, let us say, maybe 30 minutes, if that's okay. So we'll come back together at, say, 10 past the hour. We're going to, so we need your opinions on two questions here. One is the issue of sustainability, okay? And so just to know what that's about is to say pretty much everything that we've done so far has been based on a volunteer network. Now, the data Steward instructor training, that's part of a partnership with Fair's Fair, and that's for the first time we've managed to get, we have somebody who now works on the project and is being paid for that. That's British. Hello, British, so it's great. In some respect, that's really good that it's all volunteer based, but it's definitely a roadblock to how we can expand. And in particular, I think this one of the key bottlenecks is that every time we organize an event, at least a physical one, we effectively have to shake the can and get people to make contributions and so on. So that takes up a huge amount of effort. And we need to think about, well, if we want to grow, how do we get ourselves on a better financial footing? To stress, we're not doing this to sort of say, oh yeah, because we want to make loads of money. It's just to say, okay, how do we grow the number of events that we're doing and delivering those things and doing that in an effective fashion. So if you look at the shared notes, you'll see that there are some questions that we'd like you to have a look at and reflect on, and options, and letting us know what you think. We also kind of would like some quite practical bits of your thoughts on things like what's an appropriate registration fee and so on. In Breakout Room 2, we have we're running a session on instructor training. So again, another bottleneck is building up the number of instructors that we have. Particularly, and I'm particularly talking about the events that we run for the early career researchers. And there we have some questions about, okay, if we're doing everything in an online basis, how do we do things as efficient in terms of delivery and making that as effective as possible? And this is sort of it's so far quite ad hoc. Bianca is going to be running our first instructor training this year, and it would be great to kind of get your feedback on that as well. Again, if you have some, again, we have some set questions in there, and we'd love to get your feedback on that. The thing I would ask is that if when you join those breakout rooms, it would be good if there was somebody who could, please put in some notes, and if somebody could agree to, when we come back in 30 minutes, to sort of report back on that and guys try and summarize the findings so everybody can work from there. So if that's okay, we'll move to that, and let's get back in 30 minutes, which I think is now, it's going to be 15 minutes the hour. Yeah, sorry, Ben.
Yeah, just in case anyone's unfamiliar with the mechanics of how the breakout rooms work, in the shared document, there's links to the 2 breakout rooms, so please choose one of the 2 breakout rooms. You can also access the breakout rooms if you scroll down on your Gmail screen, and you'll see 4 circles saying breakout A, B, C, and D. Will be in either A or B, forget about C and D. To return back to this main room, you'll see a link that says return back to this room. So once you're done at 10 past the hour, you can just click on that link to come back here. But see you all in one of the 2 breakout rooms.